Hello and welcome again to Sacktown Talks. Your host, Jarrett Blanian. Special guest today, Jim Wunderman with the Bay Area Council. Jim, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Well, it's going pretty well. We're in interesting times. You have to say that.
Definitely. It just keeps getting more and more interesting. You heard some of the pundits talk about the sick joke of it ending at a tie 269. Not too far away from that in this scenario. So, yeah, definitely a ever interesting year.
Yeah.
Jim, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into politics?
Yeah, I've been involved in it probably 40 years, I guess, at this point, and came to I was involved a little bit back in New York, my hometown, and I came to San Francisco in 1980 and got involved in some local, volunteered from some campaigns. At the time, Phil Burton, who was the member of Congress, and in 1983, there was a recall campaign of then Mayor Feinstein. And I got involved in that. I was going to San Francisco State and studying political science. And so, it's sort of an opportunity to get some hands-on learning there. And at the same time, Phil Burton died right at the same time as that recall. So then there was a race to replace him. And so his wife, Sala, ran for his seat, and I worked for her and helped her out. And then the Feinstein people came back to me and wanted me to actually, Dianne Feinstein defeated that recall. They wanted me to work in her reelection campaign. And I said, really? And then they said they would pay me. And I couldn't imagine that someone would actually pay me to work in my chosen field. So I was actually trained as a political organizer by the same people, a fellow named Fred Ross, who trained Cesar Chavez how to organize. And then, learned to do that for a while, went back, got my degree, and then Mayor Feinstein hired me to be part of her administration. And that's really where I cut my teeth in learning about, local government, local politics, how it really functions back in her second term as mayor throughout her term. So, that's where I got started. And, from there, I went on in the waste industry, which was sort of a somewhat political place,
Right.
in the service of, providing public service, but government, under government regulation. And then I went back to do more, to organize this citywide campaign for Frank Jordan when he ran for mayor in San Francisco against the incumbent mayor, Art Agnos. And Jordan had been the police chief of San Francisco at the end of Feinstein's term, so I knew him, and they asked me to do this, and I thought I shouldn't do it, but I did it. And one thing led to another. We won the campaign, insurgency campaign, and a year later, I ended up being his deputy mayor and chief of staff. So I actually, had quite an experience, really running the city and county of San Francisco as much as that city can be run.
Wow.
And did that for a while until he was defeated by Willie Brown. And then I went off and was a consultant for the 49ers and some other folks for the next couple of years. And then went into the private sector in a publicly traded company called Providian Financial. And in that company, I was the head of external affairs, so government relations, community relations, charity. So I really had a lot of touch with the community. Here in California, it was a national company, so around the country as well. And then I was on the boards of a lot of different organizations, including I was the chair of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and I got on the board of a group called the Bay Area Council, which was kind of the business community's answer for how a region, how the business community can contribute and engage in policy on a regional scale in the Bay Area, which is made up of over 100 cities and 9 counties. And so I really was taken by that work. And then what my predecessor was taken by Governor Schwarzenegger when he won the recall election for governor as his cabinet secretary for business, transportation, and housing, Sonny McPeak. So she went to work for Arnold Schwarzenegger. Job was open. People approached me about it. One thing led to another. They asked me to do that job, and I've been in it ever since 2004.
Wow.
So it's been quite an experience. And that organization exists kind of at the intersection of government, business, educational institutions, greater community. So it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, can you give us a little more info on the Bay Area Council and kind of, I guess, who's part of it, kind of what you guys are working on?
Yeah, it's a big question. So, the Bay Area Council was created at the end of World War II when the economy of the Bay Area was a wartime economy. It's a very successful economy led by companies like the Bechtel family and Kaiser Steel built the ships, and they made airplane parts, and contributed to the war effort. And as the war was ending, these folks understood that these shipyards and these sort of massive construction facilities were going to go by the wayside. What would be the future of the Bay Area, which really at the time was a few cities: San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, was really the urban core of the Bay Area, and the rest of it was mostly hinterland, farmland, pastures. So they had a group. They created this group called the Bay Area Council. It was made up of the mayors of Oakland and San Francisco and Berkeley, and then the companies of the day: Levi Strauss, Bechtel and Kaiser, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Clorox, Standard Oil, Chevron. Those companies, the mainstay companies of the Bay Area, the San Francisco Examiner and Chronicle, I think, and they got together to think about the future of the Bay Area. And the first big project that they did was the building of the BART system. So we created BART. It was a pretty big project, pretty important. And when you're trying to think about, okay, how do we take these disparate cities, counties, and create a region? Well, you start to think about transportation, regional transit. So BART was the first heavy fixed rail system in America after World War II. So it was a pretty big undertaking. Got several counties to vote. Here in California, we have to vote on everything, so we voted on that. And the idea was to bring it to all 9 counties, but they landed in 3: San Francisco, Alameda, and Contra Costa counties. And then he's sort of been struggling ever since to expand it. We finally seem to be headed to San Jose and made it to San Francisco Airport, and so it keeps growing. But the notion of operating on a regional scale is really embedded into the Bay Area Council. So we work on transportation, we work on housing policy, workforce training, education, higher education, the things that are really the glue of a region. And we try not to get too involved in local affairs and more involved at the regional level, which kind of brings us to Sacramento, because Sacramento policy and law and regulation have a lot to do with how that's affected in the Bay Area. We created the regional agencies of the Bay Area, or we had a hand in creating them. So the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the Bay Conservation Development Commission, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Those are all agencies that were created because they really don't have there's no natural borders in a region like the Bay Area. Right. You don't really know when you're going. The air doesn't know when it's going from one city into the next. So what happens in one place affects the next. So we kind of created government to get arms around some of these kinds of issues to make the Bay Area work more effectively, with some success. And as you're always struggling to make it better.
Kind of hearing you go down memory lane here and kind of, I guess, talk about the Bay Area Council and kind of some of the industries that used to be there. You kind of see how, I guess, things have changed over time. And I guess, most recently kind of tech has taken over the Bay Area and has become kind of the tech epicenter of the world. Kind of, I guess, how has the tech movement, I guess, changed what you're working on and kind of, I guess, help, promote some of the things you might be trying to complete?
Yeah, well, back when Feinstein was mayor, we there was a movie filmed in San Francisco called A View to a Kill. It's a James Bond movie with Roger Moore and
Right.
Grace Jones, and it introduced the notion of this place called the Silicon Valley, in which the criminal person was going to basically take over Silicon Valley.
Oh, wow. You lost them. Jim, you there?
And kind of threaten the future. Am I still with you?
Yeah, we lost you for a second there.
Lost me for a sec. So
Can you repeat the story real quick, Jim? Sorry to throw you off
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
when I worked for Mayor Feinstein, we had a big opening of a movie that was filmed in the Bay Area called A View to a Kill, which was a James Bond movie featuring Roger Moore and Grace Jones. And it was about this place called, it introduced this notion of a place called the Silicon Valley. And the Silicon Valley was, this place where technology was happening, and the criminal in the movie, had nefarious purpose when it came to seeing some opportunity to sort of undermine this place and profit off of that. And since that time, and that's in the mid 1980s, Silicon Valley has changed and it's grown, and it's really become the central part of the region's economy, which was it was probably a little more diverse economy prior to that. So there was not that much technology historically. Then there was Silicon Valley. San Francisco and Silicon Valley were like worlds apart back in those times, but that's certainly no longer the case. So the knowledge-based industries, technology, has become a dominant force. And in a global economy, in digital world, the potential and the power of companies coming onto the stage and growing to a dominant position, and developing massive market capitalizations and huge workforces is it's become reality. And if you take a look at the Bay Area, we just dominate the scene. The biggest companies in the world are headquartered in the Bay Area, and then there's like hundreds of companies behind them that would be big companies anywhere else, and they're sort of almost second tier. And then you've got the unicorns and the startups, which are tomorrow's news. And we have those at a level of presence that's just far beyond what anybody else has. And it's attributable to the venture capital industry starting up in the Bay Area, investing in a few companies, having Stanford and Berkeley probably, and these sort of top business and engineering capabilities. Maybe it's sort of the secrets, innovation sauce, diversity of the Bay Area. Whatever the ingredients are, we've attracted really bright people to make their fortunes in the Bay Area. It's been pretty consistent now over a number of decades. And with that comes some challenges, right? Because you have a region of 8 million people now, and the region wasn't really conceived to handle we don't have the infrastructure. We as a group tried really hard to get things built. We've had some success, but we haven't been able to build stuff, housing and transportation, mobility infrastructure at a pace to keep up with the demand of people to come here. So it's had the unfortunate impacts of people feeling like they're pushed out, housing prices way above scale nationally, cost of living being really, really high. And for some people it's just fine because they're making very, very good incomes. But for people making a median income, or God help you, a lower income, it's really become tough. So that's what we've been wrestling with the last few years. And now with the pandemic, it's really changed a lot of people's thinking. And we're probably going into another period. We have had a cyclical economy in the Bay Area, so it's been a series of boom and bust cycles. When I was with Mayor Jordan back in the 1990s, we couldn't get anyone to come to San Francisco or build anything.
Right.
Nobody was thinking about San Francisco as a destination for business. By the time we were finishing the term, things were changing, and by the late 90s, we had this dotcom boom. The internet was being applied to business opportunity, and within a couple of years, you couldn't get a table at a restaurant. The traffic was enormous. People began complaining about the quality of life and all of that. And then very quickly, we had the dot-com bust on the back of the dot-com boom. And, people, all of a sudden apartments were cheap. People had all left, and the future, it was about 3 years period where we lost about 400,000 jobs in the Bay Area. And during that period, the rest of the state of the California actually gained jobs. So if you take the Bay Area out of the equation, there was actually job gain in California, but the Bay Area's the hit to the Bay Area was so great that we took the entire state into recession and fiscal, kind of fiscal demise. So it's, it's a very, we have the power to do it. It's a big economy, kind of tends to go up and down, and it has to be watched, I think, and cared for and thought about by folks, whether you're from the Bay Area or if you're from somewhere else, because what happens in the Bay Area will affect your region, if our economy does well or our economy doesn't do well. We recovered from the dot-com bust. And within a few, I wondered if we could. That's when I took the job, 2004. And within a few years, we were doing really well. Just a few years, it was a reasonably quick recovery. We got all the jobs back, and then the mortgage meltdown happened. That wasn't a Bay Area phenomenon. That was a national one.
Right.
We got hit as hard as anybody, but no worse, no less. But within a short period of time, we lost hundreds of thousands of jobs. Again, we wondered about the future. Will tech return to the Bay Area? And when it started coming back, boy, it came back with a vengeance. And this time, I think the failure that happened in the dot-com era was that you had very weak, not thought through business models that people were investing mightily in. So the problem really was that you just had businesses that were designed to fail. People didn't know it. And when one started to go, it was like a domino effect. But that, after that, there was some learning that took place. So suddenly, I think in the Bay Area, you have a very, very, very thoughtful, very, very experienced and very capable business leadership that's there. It really understands the dynamics of business and how to merge the new technology with very, very solid business principles and even innovative business principles. So companies have been really successful there. And so the signal is the Bay Area is a really good place to go to start or develop a business because they know how to do stuff there. And you've got education and institutions that support this. And when I'm not doing my day job, I teach a course in executive leadership at the UC Davis graduate school of management, and the quality of the people in the class, these are all working professionals. It's really high. It's really smart people out there, and it's diverse. So you get a lot of different kinds of thought, a lot of different kinds of people, backgrounds, and so forth, coming into the Bay Area a lot of times from other places, bringing different cultures with them, and it creates a pretty good stew. So now we're into this period, and we're wondering about the next. We're obviously in a recession. We're in the pandemic. We've been hit harder than other regions. Our region's recovered more slowly than the state of California. State of California has recovered more slowly than the rest of the country. And we've got our state is being very cautious about getting people back into their sort of regular work and normal lives, probably for good reason, keep people safe, and we have a reasonably good track record on that. But at some point, you got to get the kids back in school, got to get people back at work. It's been 7-8 months now. People are getting a little frenetic about it. But what will come, is people are leaving the Bay Area for other places because the prices have been so high. A lot of the things that we're building up in the Bay Area before the pandemic were exacerbated. The pandemic had an effect, like a steroidal effect on some of the challenges that we had. And the biggest was when the pandemic hit, we all took to our laptops wherever our laptops were or we wanted them to be. So we started to work remotely, and we very quickly learned we could. Bay Area Council currently doesn't have an office anymore. We moved out of our office because there was no reason to pay rent, and we work and we do pretty well. And this is how our members are experiencing it for the most part. Now, after a bunch of months, you start to wonder, like, is this a long-term thing? What's our future plan going to be? Are we to bring people back? How many? And I talk to my members about this all the time. What's your plan? And the honest answer is always, I don't know. So the companies don't know. So that's uncertainty. Uncertainty doesn't always go well with business or regional planning or those kind of things. So, that's a real challenge for us. But what we do know is there's a lot of Bay Area people right now in places like Sun Valley, Idaho, or Aspen, or Austin. They're just gone, Connecticut, they've gone home, they're with their family or some other place, and they're feeling out whether they could work in some other place and not live in the Bay Area anymore at these prices. And at least in San Francisco, as a good example, the price of an apartment has come way down. There's a lot of vacancy. Suddenly, the shoe's on the other foot, and the landlords are hungry for tenants, and the commercial landlords the same. There's I don't know how many 8 or 9 million square feet of, I think, just sublease commercial space available in San Francisco. So that's pretty massive and overnight. So the impact on rents will be what you'll think it would be. And soon San Francisco is going to be a bargain. So is it a bargain you want to be in? I don't know, but it's going to, for a while, it's going to be a value, at least in terms of the rent. When it comes to taxes and regulations and some other things, it may not be a bargain. So that those are some things companies will have to think about. But there's a reset going on. There's no question about that.
Yeah, like it was kind of fascinating seeing the state deal with COVID-19 and then kind of the Bay Area deal with it as well, and kind of the Bay Area kind of banded together and kind of moved in unison. And you see, for the population they have some of the best numbers in the state. Most of the counties are in orange. San Francisco miraculously in the yellow. Can you kind of talk to us? Did you guys work with the health officials and kind of the businesses and dealing with COVID-19? And I guess what's the secret? How can somewhere like San Francisco, so highly dense, get into the yellow?
Well, I think that I wasn't aware that the health officials were banding together. We were aware that the governor was working on a plan that was pretty restrictive plan. And then I heard that the health officials were getting together, and I got a little more information about that. And then they jointly announced that they were, as a regional group, this is the kind of thing that you pray for, that the disparate governments of your region would actually come together, plan together, and release a common, pretty definitive statement together, so that it sent a message that everybody was in alignment and the rules were going to be the same for everybody. So that was really good. As time went on, unfortunately, that did change, and the different counties adopted, different, the counties aren't the same. They weren't experiencing the same level of cases. This is even before well before the governor's new system came in. So then the governor's new system came in, and it was specific as to how many cases you have and how many new cases and hospitalizations and mortality, and, set out these different color-coded messages that you have to somewhat abide by, although you could do more. So these folks are still working together, but it's not like it was in the beginning. We have, I think getting out in front of it and taking serious action saved a lot of lives. And I think we owe a lot of debt of gratitude to the leaders here for being aggressive about it. And, then, having to face up, county supervisors and so forth, face the pressures from people saying, well, you've closed my gym, you've closed my business, I can't operate. And we have basically a controlled recession now. We've got, and with massive unemployment. So, I think we've certainly done better. And I think the people of the Bay Area, and San Francisco is a really good case, have done a really good job of observing the advice, wearing masks, the basic stuff, keeping a social distance, not pushing the envelope as we see in a lot of other parts of the country, and it pays off. Now, that said, we've had a few spikes in different places, and we thought from that first go round that we had avoided it. It looked really good, and then as soon as we started going back and getting kind of getting lax, the caseloads went up, and so we were really concerned that we were going to be like the next New York. Now, it didn't happen because we quickly clamped down. In my county, Contra Costa County, we went down a level, And just yesterday, the county announced we had more cases, so we're going back and being more restrictive again. So it's been this kind of cycle. And it'll probably be that way until they find a really solid cure or a vaccine or both, which we think will happen in the next while. So, that's just the nature of this virus. You know how to avoid it, but when you stop doing what you know how to do, it knows how to come back to you. So I think that there's a balance that has to be found here as to how to use what we now know. We know so much more about this virus than we knew when it started. And, I think there is a methodology here to how to get people back to normal life, but do it in a way that isn't going to spike the count and keep people largely safe from it. There's always some risk, and that's the hard part. There's always some risk.
Right. San Francisco is a huge tourist area, kind of one of the number one tourist areas in the nation. Have you been in the city lately, and kind of what's it like there? And
I have. It's sad,
how are the hotels and stuff?
Yeah, it's a sad situation. It really is to see it's boarded up. Some of the key areas, financial district and so forth, they look bad. You get out into the neighborhoods, not as much, but in the core area of the city,
Right.
it's really bad. And obviously people aren't traveling. There's travel restrictions. San Francisco airport's a ghost town. So is Oakland. We're facing a situation in which the core, a lot of the core business of San Francisco, big conventions that drive lots of people into town, not feasible. Big entertainment, the Warriors spent $1.5 billion on the greatest new arena, and and it was closed within a couple of months, and it's been closed since. Professional sports, all these things that the cultural institutions, the symphony, the opera, the things that really make a place unique and why people were sort of going to cities for these amenities are no longer items of value. And these were things that people were willing to pay a premium for in terms of their rent or their housing costs. And now, they're not willing to pay a premium for it because they don't exist, and they may not be around for a while. So it's putting a pause on how people feel about being in this kind of an urban environment. And we see it in New York, we see it in San Francisco, some degree in LA, Chicago, some others. Certain cities where this premium existed in big time are really disaffected by this. So we'll have to see in the future what the strategies will be, and so probably some changes will happen to get people sort of re-engaged. Now, at the end of the day, San Francisco, it's got stuff that other the suburban areas don't have, and that other cities don't have. It's pretty unique, iconic place. So I think in the long term, there's no if our city, our region, our state should do fine as long as we enable it to do fine. If we suppress their capabilities, then that's a different story. We could artificially, I think, and maybe unintentionally, really hurt our chances to fully recover and have places that fully thrive again, and that's a concern.
Yeah. Some things you guys were working on, with transportation and housing, Scott Wiener was trying to work on SB 50, things like that intersection of housing and transportation to make it easy to live and work in a city and get to work. Kind of with COVID-19, things have changed now. I guess, do you still see those as priorities to work on, extra housing and transportation, or have things changed, and is teleworking gonna be here to stay and kind of maybe solve some of these problems?
Well, look, I think that the challenges that we have here are the result of our failure to create the infrastructure we need to be the center of a growing and thriving economy. So right now we're not a growing and thriving economy. So it may seem like we don't need these things anymore. You know, if you take a look at the Bay Bridge in the morning, you know, there's cars going over it, but you don't see, you know, traffic jams like we used to see, and so forth. So some folks might say, well, we don't need to deal with it. But these are all long-term generational issues. And my view is you can't take your foot off the gas on those kinds of issues. Now, you know, the folks riding on transportation were probably at 10%, 8%. You know, that's really, really bad. That's enough to break your business. So we have an immediate problem of how do we maintain transportation systems when nobody's using them, because if people do need to go from place A to place B, they can use their car. They're not going to be in the kind of traffic they used to be, and they feel safer in their car. They really don't want to get on a train or a bus with a whole bunch of people. I'm the chair of WIDA, which is the region's ferry system. And, you know, we're facing this, I think we're at like 6% capacity. And before the pandemic, every month was our biggest month, and we kept having to add boats, and we've bought a lot of equipment, and now, you know, but I think that's a temporary thing, you know, and I think over time when things open up, more traffic will occur, more people will come back to transit. You know, once we get a cure or a vaccine, people will feel safer, or even by using it and finding that, you know, we're not seeing spikes, you know, people will feel safer. All the transit agencies and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission has a plan for, you know, ensuring that people are socially distanced, that we're cleaning the cars and the buses and the ferries, you know, on a regular basis, and you know, we're informing people, you know, that people have to wear masks and things like that. So, you know, I think we shouldn't stop planning, you know, to get people from their cars and onto mass transit, because that's a much better way to run an urban region. It's a much more unlimited way to run an urban region. You know, once you put in the basic infrastructure, it's a lot easier to grow your capacity in mass transit than it is with automobiles, where you're really limited to this road infrastructure, and it's very expensive and almost undesirable to continue to throw more cars at it. So I think we have to continue with housing. We went generations, really, we stopped building around 1980. Until about 1980, the Bay Area was kind of in a building boom. And actually, you know, when the Beat generation came to San Francisco back in the 50s, you know, the main enticement was cheap rent. So, you know, we had built a bunch of new neighborhoods, rent was cheap, people came, artists and poets, and, you know, that's what happened at that time. And, you know, people don't remember that. I don't even remember it. I just heard it, and I believe it's true, but I can't prove it. You know, once 1980 hit, if you take a look on the chart, it just dropped off. And so we've got about 40 years of sort of rejection of the notion that we're going to build more housing in cities and in the suburban areas. So, you know, over time, you know, you sort of learn, you know, what does that do? You know, you constrain supply. People want to live here because you've got all those amazing job opportunities, and the quality of life is very good. It's the Bay Area. We've got great weather. You know, we're close to skiing and the mountains and the wine country, and, you know, the oceans. You know, we got, you know, it's a great place to live. Temperate climate. So prices go up. Housing becomes, you know, dear, and that's what we did. So we really need to build more housing. We need to put it in places where people can have the best chance not to have to use their car. I think that's what those bills are about, you know, that Senator Wiener's been at the front of, but, you know, he's not alone in that. And, you know, I think we have to find some balance. You know, we've got a lot of cities, and some of them feel like they're suburban cities, and they don't want to be like other kinds of cities. And, you know, so we need to figure out ways to, you know, make that work. And, you know, we've passed a lot of bills to make it work, and some other bills that go a little farther have been rejected. What we haven't done is we haven't incentivized housing so that the cities actually want it. And, you know, when you try to force something on somebody, you tend to have bad result.
Right.
And I think we've had bad results. And, you know, I think Prop 13 has a lot to do with this, the way we handle the fiscal distribution of funds in the state. It should be that if you build housing in your community, that's a financial benefit to your town, and it looks good on the balance sheet, and on the incomes. You know, you make money from this. Okay,
Right.
if you make money from something, you tend to do it. If it costs you money, you tend not to want to do it. And if it's somewhat neutral, but the people who are your constituents complain about it, it's also, you know, to the downside. So it's that's somewhere where the reality is there. We need to switch it around. So you know, we're talking to folks about, okay, how could we, you know, think for the future about making housing something low, you know, because local governments ultimately are the ones who decide. They have land use authority. It's really what local government does. Most of what local government does is like what other local government does. It's similar from town to town, but land use is distinct and really a very important role of local government. And we've given, you know, home rule, you know, so they have a lot of authority that they don't want to give up. So, and their constituents expect them to, you know, carefully manage what happens in a given place. And we've got a lot of rules in place that we, you know, California Environmental Quality Act, but a lot of other rules which make it very expensive to build housing, you know, fees and requirements and, you know, zoning controls and all kinds of ways that, you know, if you're a home builder, you have to be really selective about what you build and where you build it. So I think you know, I think a lot of that is because cities are cash strapped. And so they see, you know, everybody sees the development as a cash cow. Okay, we're going to use that development to, you know, get all this stuff. That's not, you know, you should see the development as a chance to have the development. The development is a good thing because, you know, you're meeting the housing needs. And, you know, you know, in other cities and other regions, it's like the first thing that folks do is, okay, we want to have a successful city here, so we got to build housing. Let's take a look at the map. Where do we zone for more housing? How much housing can we get so that we can encourage people to come? I think we used to think like this in the Bay Area at one time, but it was before my time.
I know the Bay Area Council has spent a lot of time looking at different countries in China, looking at their infrastructure, their transportation systems. Kind of, what have you learned from looking at a city like Hong Kong that you could bring back to San Francisco?
Well, I've learned that some things I probably shouldn't say in a digital environment. I've learned that I'm a very jealous person, you know, because I'm amazed by what they're able to do and what they've done. I mean, the massiveness, you know, you know, we went to China in around 2006, 7, and we went to this district in Shanghai. You know, Shanghai, a lot of Shanghai was really old industrial, you know, sort of old industrial China. And this particular district on the waterfront, called Yangpu, you know, we were introduced to and sort of encouraged to locate an office there. And, you know, they had a museum. Most of these districts have a museum that they call their planning museum. So this is an area of a couple of million people. They call it a district. And you go in this museum and you look at what they're planning to build and what they're planning to be like in the future, and you go, no, you know, they're not going to happen.
Right.
You're not going to be able to do that. And, you know, we would go back every year, and every year you could see the difference. And if you went now, everything they said they were going to do, they did, and they did more. And, you know, subway lines, I mean, massive new infrastructure, you know, housing, you know, all the kind of stuff we want to do, they did in that period of time. And their district was not unique. This is just one place. And, you know, and to the incredible benefit of the people there. You know, they've uplifted the lives of the people there. Now, did everybody like it? You know, some people got moved. You know, there were these really old housing accommodations, which were, you know, culturally accepted, but really beyond their time. And, you know, they were replaced by modern facilities. You know, I think for the whole of it, I think the Chinese people look at this and go, I get this, you know, this is good. You know, our government is moving us forward. Well, they have a command and control government. You know, they have a one-party government. It's in control. They decide what's going to happen. They create a plan, and their job is to execute the plan. And they're held accountable really by the publics, but, you know, for doing what they said they were going to do, because potentially the people could throw out the party if they don't accomplish that. And people know when their quality of life is getting better or worse. So if you go to China, transportation is very available, high-speed rail all over the country, inexpensive, relatively inexpensive to use. Education, very, very, increasingly good quality, very inexpensive, accessible to the public at all different kinds of levels for all purposes. Uh, you know, you can complain about the kind of system that they have, and they're not perfect by any means. Not, who is? But I'd say that most people feel like they're being uplifted and have confidence in the future, and feel like they're on the right track most of the time. And so I'm kind of envious of that. And what I think you learn from it is, look, you've got to recognize what it takes to be successful and go get it, go do it. And I think we were doing a lot of that here. So we were investing in research and development. We were investing in our future innovation potential. We were allowing, businesses to succeed and thrive and encourage them. And, I think we've become a little bit, I don't know what you'd call it, but, we've become reluctant to support the kind of things that in the society we know we need to do in order to be competitive. And so then we're frustrated with China because they're getting ahead of us. We're nervous that China is going to exceed the United States and that they're going to have better telecommunications than we're going to have, and they're going to have new ways of managing big debt. Well, we can do all of that. We're in a great position to compete. All we have to do is decide we want to do that,
Right.
and then back it. So I'm excited to see what happens in the future, the very near future, as we'll see if a new administration comes in, and it's looking like that's likely to happen. And we plan to be influential with them and explain what we think those opportunities look like, and start heading back, not just for the Bay Area and the state, but for the country, to start heading back in that direction. The Bay Area doesn't need to be, have a monopoly on innovation by any means. That's way beyond us. All we have to, but to be the center of a lot of it puts us in a great position. And it's very, very helpful then to the next region. Another thing that we've been doing lately is we've been working on the concept of a mega region in Northern California. So, not just look at the Bay Area as being within these boundaries of these 9 counties, but recognize that we're probably part of a 22 county ecosystem that includes Sacramento and Northern San Joaquin County, and, maybe Monterey County, and you draw the map different ways. But, there's a lot of benefit to be had by seeing this as one big economy, one big diverse economy, rather than, this rather built out feeling Bay Area. So we've been working with the groups from these different subregions to see how we can come together and actually scope out a plan for for a certain oneness that would have been inconceivable a generation ago, but now people are excited about this.
Yeah, even 10 years ago.
Even 10 years, when we first laid out the idea of this, which was like 10, 12 years ago, we got a lot of pushback.
Right.
And now we don't get that. It's more, gets more into the details of how you're going to do it. What does that look like? How do we make sure we get our fair share of jobs? How do we get the kind of growth we want here? But, when you talk about infrastructure in China, they lay a good example. We're really not that big a region. This area I'm talking about is not actually that big. If you go to China, you have to see what they've connected and made one thing through this high-speed rail network. And also, you think about how much cleaner the air is when you do that, when you take all those cars off the road or eliminate these short airplane flights. That's what they've done. So when we go to China, we extensively use the rail system, and we love it. We just love it. It's, it's completely reliable, predictable, safe. And, we can get around, and, we can have a meeting, we can be staying in one city, go and have a meeting in a city that's, 150 miles away, 200 miles away, and get back for dinner. If we want to do that, and not think twice about it. So people, you increase your labor market, you increase the, viability of places that were kind of on the fringe, and suddenly they're not on the fringe anymore. I look at like UC Davis, which I have some relationship to and teach there. And, UC Davis is a great institution, but it's sort of on the fringe of two regions, Sacramento region
Exactly.
and the Bay Area. But from my way of looking at it, it's the center of our region. UC Davis is ground zero for this mega region, and could really become a very important institution if you look at it that way. And I think eventually that's what's going to happen.
No, amazing, exciting stuff coming on, and it'd be exciting having one of the Bay Area's own in the White House here as vice president, and
Very,
see
very
what you guys
exciting.
can work on. So exciting stuff coming up here in 2021 possibly. It'll be interesting to see what you guys are working on.
Well, we are. I will say this: we are concerned about the business climate. We're concerned about the level of taxation in the state, and the sort of, the thinking that you can just keep taxing and taxing and taxing to meet the demands of folks, in the capital or in a given city, and that there's just no end to it, and it won't have any effect. And the reality is, businesses, there's a tipping point, and we think we've reached the tipping point. And when you add the steroidal effect of the pandemic, with now companies seeing that, hey, I don't need my people here. They could work in another place. In fact, I don't even need to be in this place. And if you're a wealthy individual, I can go to another state and I can relate back to the Bay Area when I need to personally. So why pay the highest income tax in the country? I could live in a state that has no income tax, and they want to raise the income tax. So when legislators propose those things, it really puts a damper on our future. And so we're speaking up about it. We're not an anti-tax group. We've been accused of being a pro-tax business group because we've supported a lot of investments that have to come through taxation, and a civil society needs taxes. But it's gone, it's gone too far. And, we really need, I think California needs a reset in how it thinks about its revenues, how it manages its revenues, and to set the stage really for it to be able to bring in more revenue, to be more successful. Because I think right now it's sort of hit a ceiling. You see with Proposition 15, here you had an incredibly huge turnout, and Prop 15 loses. And it's a well-funded campaign in favor of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that says something. People are kind of getting the memo that, like, this isn't the way to go about it. Now, they didn't get the memo in San Francisco somehow, but we'll leave that to the next one. But really, there's got to be a better way to do what we're doing. And it isn't to say we don't need to invest more in our schools, in higher education, in our infrastructure. I mean, we need to do these things. We totally understand that even though we're spending a lot more money than we've ever spent before, there are needs and California is not going to be a cheap, low-cost place. That's not the goal. It's not our thinking. But there should be, in an economic situation like we're in, there should be a recovery plan that's sort of real to business, that speaks to business and says, if you are willing to come in and replace those jobs that got kind of burned by the pandemic, or you're willing to come in and build a new plant, you're willing to come in and, not just start up, but do more, we'll incentivize that. We'll give you a break. We'll encourage you. We'll let you know we want you to do that. And, I don't see that. I'd like to see that, because other states are certainly doing that. When we're very much in competition, it's irritating when a firm like CBRE in Los Angeles announces it's, one of our top commercial real estate firms picks up and says, we're moving our headquarters to Dallas. I mean, it should ring the bell. Or Charles Schwab is moving to Dallas, or, so there's a lot of examples of this, and they're happening more frequently, and it's going to get more frequent, I'm afraid. We're going to see more of this, and then we start generating the perception, and this perception that, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal love to play up this perception of the Bay Area as yesterday's news. Everybody's always waiting for the demise of California, right? And so okay, we are not in our, this isn't our best day. We are having some challenges here, right? So let's acknowledge that we're having challenges. What can we do about it? We also have some incredible people and assets, and now we have, maybe the Vice President of the United States being one of our own, right? So I think we have some real opportunity here to, show everybody how to do it, find a little more balance in the capital, and kind of get business back to the table, real conversation about, okay, what's it going to take? What do you need? That seems to me to be a natural question that government should be asking the people who provide the jobs.
Right. No, definitely well said. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you, and so interesting hearing all about the council and the history of the Bay Area. I hope you have a good one, and thanks for joining us. And you got anything else to say before we get out of here?
No, thanks for having me. And again, this is a big day when we're doing this, taping this. Is that will probably be an announcement of who the next president of the United States is. So it's a very exciting time, and I hope you have a great weekend. Enjoy.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, Jim. Have a good one.
Take care.
Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Make sure you like and subscribe on your YouTube page, hit that notification bell, or rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. Thanks to producers Phil and Vernon, and we'll be back to you on Wednesday. Thank you.
Some are called dreamers.